Hi, I'm Jean Wilson, and this is IntroPsychSessions.
Welcome to IntroPsychSessions, Season 3. I'm your host, Garth Neufeld. In Season 2, I overhauled my Introductory Psychology class and chatted with a bunch of amazing teachers of psychology about the process. Then, some of you emailed me with questions or comments. So I invited you to take the Intro Psych discussion further. These are our conversations, and we hope you'll all enjoy IntroPsychSessions Season 3. Well, Jean, thank you for reaching out to me about IntroPsychSessions Season 2. And, you know, in your intro, we didn't put an institution in your intro when you were introducing yourself, because you actually represent 3 different institutions. And you are an adjunct faculty member. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you do, where you work, how long you've been doing this for?
Sure. I've been doing adjunct teaching for about 20 years, but I was working full time until about 2017. And so I got my PhD in 2018, and then that fall I started doing more adjunct teaching. So actually, to make a liar out of myself, I started doing adjunct teaching for the George Washington University in 2015. I teach biostatistics in the Milken Institute of Public Health. It's their MPH program, their master's program. Okay. And then for Carroll Community College, I was teaching statistics. I just stopped doing that. For Frederick Community College, I do teach psychology. That's what I teach. And I actually have 3 classes for IntroPsych this fall. And then the other school is Southern New Hampshire University, where I'm still active as well. And for them, I teach psychology too. But right now I'm teaching a lot of social psych because that's my thing.
Okay, you're a social psychologist. And have you just started teaching then in the last 5 years, or have you been teaching for a long time?
Yeah, I was working full time and teaching part time. I started at the University of Phoenix back in 2003 when they had campuses in Maryland, and I started with them, and then did that until they closed those campuses in about 2014, maybe something like that.
Okay, and then you went back to get a PhD.
I did.
Wow.
In 2013, I started, and I got my PhD in, no shocker, cognition and instruction. Because all of my other degrees are psych, but I'm not a therapist, never have been. I worked in social research for 20 years and that kind of thing.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me ask you. So you heard IntroPsychSessions Season 2, and then you reached out to me with a very kind email, very thoughtful, also self-reflective, and talking about some things that you do. What was it that resonated from those conversations with you, and what were you feeling as you were listening to those?
Boy, well, the overall feeling, Garth, was, oh my goodness, what a huge thing you have taken on. Totally just going back to step 1, like you're brand new, and just deconstruct the whole thing and do it all over again. So I did get out of it that I'm not the only intro psych teacher who maybe has a topic or two they're not terribly comfortable with. Yeah. And that's okay. I did look at the guidelines from the APA and was pleasantly surprised to see that I'm actually doing most of that. Thank goodness. So that made me look. You made me look.
That's great.
So,
well, yeah. Okay, let's start there for a second, or let's just stay there for a second, because I think that there are a lot of faculty in your position, and I was actually in your position with the standards like years ago, before IPI from APA, before they put out those student learning outcomes and suggestions for the course. I found myself, the pillars model did that for me before there were outcomes. Like, am I covering? I had already cut a bunch of content, so the pillars helped me see the domains of psychology, and the recommendation for make sure that you're giving students the broad coverage of psychology. You don't have to hit everything, but the broad coverage is pretty important. That was really helpful for me. It was a sigh of relief to think, oh, good, I am hitting some standard. So what are you doing in your classes that does anything stick out to you that uh, where you felt like it's this assignment or it's this way that I structure my class or it's these outcomes that really align with the APA outcomes?
Well, the one thing is because I come from social research, it is not a foreign thing for me to go, well, how would you research that? Or when I worked in social research, we actually did this. And at least I can give them a practical example. But I do try to ask them, well, if you were going to research that, how would you do that? And I don't just do it when I'm doing my whole blast on different kinds of research methods and all that. But I try to do that throughout the course because that's my natural inclination because I spent 20 years doing that.
Well, that sounds to me like theme A of the integrative themes that this is going to weave through the entire course. Psychology is a science, and these are the kinds of questions that we ask of problems or the questions out there in the world that we're trying to understand. Right? We ask them from a research perspective. That's interesting to hear about your particular lens and how you're bringing that and how it shapes the way that you approach a class. Because we all have them, right? But yours is, yours is like, is really a particular way of seeing that. So would you say that's a major emphasis for you, is the research bit?
I don't know about major, but I usually touch on it in each unit, when we're discussing things. Because you know what you do in psych class, I always tell my students, you're going to talk about a bunch of theories. Some of these theories are going to make sense to you and some of them aren't. Right. And so it's when we're talking about, okay, here's 3 different theories. Which one do you like best and why? And then we start talking about research and, just trying to weave it all in there just because that's what I like.
Yeah, well, I like what you're doing there is you're creating more context. It's almost like a story. What works here for me, and then trying to understand why it works. Like what's the story of science within this theory? And I think that's a great opportunity to get into history of psychology and
yes.
Yeah, and how we came to this, but also just it changes the way students think about. Hopefully, it changes the way students think about the world and ask those questions. So with season 2, did any of the particular conversations stick out to you, or was it kind of the whole thing?
Was a lot of it the whole thing. I mean, the one thing I wrote to you about, I know for sure, was talking about news articles and getting people, my psych students, during a regular semester 4 times, to go out and find something that's going on in the world and write me a couple paragraphs about it and how does it relate to what we're talking about in class right now. Because I don't want them thinking that psychology is just some, it's a class I'll take and your partner in crime said, and they don't remember a thing a couple years later, right?
Yeah.
So, at least if I can help them relate it to what's going on, in the real world, then maybe hopefully some of it will stick with them.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit. So the news article assignment, I think, came from the Susan Nolan episode. So if people are interested, they can go and check that out. Jean, how do you approach the news article assignment? Because I know you do it 4 times a term, but how do you talk with your students about it? And what does the assignment actually look like?
Well, it's just basically as simple as I just said.
Okay.
I do tell them if there's something going on in the world that's, oh gosh, like we haven't had this, between all of the differing opinions around COVID. And then we went through and all the politics. I live in the DC area. My local news is everybody else's national news, Right. So my students are like wrapped up right in that. And so I try to get them to pick different things, don't try to look at other stuff besides that major headline. But it's really simple. I just want 2 paragraphs. The first one should tell me about the article, and the second one is how it applies to class. That's all I'm looking for from them. Just something to just get them out there beyond the book and, the slides and my lectures.
Do you have the students share any of those, or are those just for you?
I don't have them share them, but the other thing I do is before they take a test, they have to write 3 different thought questions So it's something, not just a yes or no question. They discuss them in groups. And so a lot of times, sometimes that will come up. The other thing I try to do in my lectures is, if something major is going on in the world, if it fits the topic that I'm teaching, I try to bring that right in. I mean, I have examples from books I've read in the last couple of years, just things that are not necessarily psychology, but they're great examples of the thing that I'm trying to teach right now.
Yeah, I actually recall from your email to me that you make a practice of integrating books, nonfiction kind of, or books that you've read on specific topics. But the topics were really interesting to me. Like the topic examples you gave me were adoption and foster care, which would be, by some measurements, pretty small little areas of psychology research. But can you tell me why those ones? What's your interest in that topic?
Ever since I was probably 12 or 13, I'd always wanted to adopt a child out of foster care, and our fourth child was adopted out of foster care. It's been like a lifelong thing. And I did my master's thesis on adoption, actually, but that was, so that's where that interest comes from.
Isn't that... Yeah, go ahead.
Again, it's just, there's a lot out there now, especially, there's a lot more about how children were taken from Native Americans, and how Terman controlled all of the talk about IQ for so many years, to the point of not even publishing studies that contradicted his eugenics outlook. And so we talk about all of that because, a lot of that stuff's coming out now with what happened with the Catholic Church, with the Native children, and on and on and on. And so it's just kind of a natural lead into a lot of the topics that you and me teach in this class.
I don't know when this came about for you, but as you're explaining this to me, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think at some point in a career, probably whether teaching or not teaching, we get comfortable with bringing our expertise or our passions into the classroom. I have this bias, I think it's a pretty good one, but that my students are going to be the most excited about the things that I'm most authentically excited about. Yeah, I see you shaking your head. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No question. If you get really into something, they're going to be right behind you into it.
Well, and your depth of knowledge in this area, it also gives you, I think, a lot more authority, right, to address a topic like this in a class. And we've already talked about this today, which in a class where we often feel like we don't know everything about every topic, right? So how have you dealt with that? The fact that we are not experts on everything we teach in Intro Psych.
Well, I'm honest with them, for one thing. I said, neuroscience is my downfall. And I have said to my students, I'm going to present you what I have. And I try to keep, inserting it here and there. Well, this is this part of the brain. But I said, there's probably some people in this class who know a whole lot more about this than I do. And that's okay. This is a community college, but we have, pre-nursing and physical therapy and all that kind of stuff. There are people in that class know more than I do. And it's okay. And sometimes they speak up and teach, and I'm like, go for it.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Well, that's great. I think that you embrace that. I think that's the right move on it. What else is challenging to you in the Intro Psych course? Are there any other... I think probably institution to institution is interesting. Moving from community college, I guess you're teaching most of your intro at a community college. Is that right?
Yeah, I haven't taught it online. So yeah.
Okay. Much. Yeah. And what are the most kind of challenging areas of teaching this course for you in that context?
I tell them the first day I'm not a therapist, but you and I both know that these students will tell you things either in writing, and if it's something where I can refer them for services, I will do that, because all of our schools have that now. But that's hard sometimes, that they talk to you about things that you're kind of like, as I refer you to someone to help you if you like. This is
yeah.
What do you do? But sometimes they just say it in class, and you're like, okay, well, thank you for sharing that experience. Wow, it really makes things real for us.
you've already told me a little bit about your class in terms of, I've heard you do tests. I've heard you an assignment or a couple assignments that you do. Can you just give us the brief? What's the overall structure of your course? How do students earn points? How are students successful in your course?
Well, my tests are online. It's open book, open note. You got an hour and a half, go for it. I've over the years lost my patience with collecting paper. So the tests are online, so they can do those at home. It's also nice when they're if a student has accommodations, because they don't have to worry about going to the testing center, going somewhere else to take a test. You just take it at home when you're ready.
Yeah.
So it's benefited those students too to be able to do that. So that's first, tests are online. The overall structure of the class. Well, I have 4 units that I do. And so they get points by doing each. Well, I'm going to start giving points for participation. I stopped doing that during the pandemic, reinstituting that.
Why did you do that? Why are you reinstituting that?
Attendance issues.
Yeah.
Everybody's
want to motivate them to come.
Yeah, it's something to, exactly. And then they also do, let's see here, they have to select a topic for their paper and get that to me early, because I put them in groups for the presentations. So there's a list of topics, and then I try to assign people to the ones that they like. They have a paper, a presentation, the 4 tests, and the news articles. Is that right? Yeah.
If they're doing presentations in class, right, during class time, what are you not covering? What are you not doing? Because you're taking class time. I like this move. You're taking class time to let students research, give them the skills of presenting. So what don't you do in order to make time for that? Does that make sense? So one of the conversations that, Eric and I have is that when you choose to cover some content in Intro Psych, you are letting go of other content, right? When you choose to use your class time for student presentations, you choose not to lecture on certain topics. Yeah, go ahead.
The papers are about psychological disorders, and they are the lecture on those topics.
Oh, okay. So for that assignment, it's all with that one unit or not one topic. Okay, I see. Yeah, it'd be an interesting. What do you think about? I like this paper presentation idea. What would you think about broadening that across different topics? Because there's so many intro psych topics that are interesting to students. What if, and I'm just playing here in my head, what if a person was to assign your assignment for the presentations, research and presentations on topics throughout those 4 units, and then use those to kind of present some of the material in a little bit more depth? Would that work, or would that not work?
I'm debating how much I want to say. I believe that might not work.
Yeah, tell me why.
The same attendance issues that we've been having.
Okay.
And so I want to see how this goes with giving credit for coming to class.
Yeah.
And see what that does, and then we'll go from there.
So you think that if someone is in your situation at the community college, and I have some of the same issues.
Let me turn this. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
I have some of the same issues, but you're thinking that if you had students doing presentations throughout, you might be in positions where students aren't coming, and then it throws off the schedule, and then they can't present on their topic, and it doesn't make sense to do it the next class. Is that your concern?
It kind of, because these are group presentations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
always
now I'm the evil witch of the West, because what I do is, and that's no denigration to people who are consider themselves witches. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but if so the papers are individual. and I've stopped making the papers and the presentations due on the same day. Presentations this semester will be 2 weeks before the presentations, hoping that will help. If one of your teammates does not contribute to the presentation, you're not in high school anymore. Don't put their name on it.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah.
By the way, I like that move. I think it doesn't always occur to people. I could see, and the move I'm talking about is making those papers due early. I see you as that you're solving problems with some of your structure. Even you talked about accommodations earlier with online testing. You can eliminate problems with creative solutions, just changing the way you do things as an instructor. And then here again, I've definitely been in a situation where I had students turn in their paper and do the presentations all on the same day. I like your move here to have that due early. I think it's a little easier for students that way.
I hope so. What I'm hoping is that because it's done, then everybody will have the information they need to do the presentation. They won't be trying to write the last paragraph of the paper and getting it into the presentation in time for class.
Hey, let me ask you a question about that. So these students have, let's say that they split, that paper equally and they all learn from it and they've learned about the topic. Why do you have students also present afterwards?
Because each person does their own paper. It's not a group paper.
Okay.
And because, in the groups are kind of split up, I've kind of combined some of the topics that might be kind of near each other in psychology.
Yep.
And so, or as psychological disorders. So I might have somebody printing, the same group might be presenting on depression and anxiety. And so a couple of people are going to do their own papers on depression, a couple more on anxiety, and then they push it all into one presentation because depression and anxiety can co-occur.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So basically, that's why they each have their own separate paper. They're not working on a group paper. You're
right. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Again, that's a way that you kind of strategize to that group project problem where you're working with people, have people do individual papers and a group presentation when they're already prepared. Yeah, it's a nice tactic. We'll see if it works. Yeah, well, I hope it does. I hope you'll email me and let me know if it worked for you. This is what we do. We just kind of think through things and try to do our best. And then if they flop, which it probably won't, but if they flop, we think through it, right? We critically.
Yeah, you move on.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to thank you for taking time to meet with me today. Did we miss anything that you were hoping to talk about today as we were corresponding back and forth?
My only question is, are you going to come back and tell everybody how this worked out?
Oh, you know what? So I have my first class now where I'm on quarter, so I don't start until the end of September. So I think so. Why don't I commit right here to maybe a few updates throughout the term? I think that could be kind of fun to see how things are going. I think you'll also be excited. I revisited in this season, I'm going to revisit with Eric Landrum as well, who did some really crazy stuff in his classroom this last term. So I think the follow-up is interesting. And I hope when I follow up, it will cue you. Email me a follow-up of let me know how things went.
That, and then are you sharing your syllabus? Once you develop your syllabus, are you going to share it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. My syllabus is pretty bare bones because most of the actual assignments are in the learning management system. So I'll have my outcomes in the syllabus and I'll have the major assignments, but not a lot of detail. But I am happy to share anything that I come up with anybody. So please do email me if you have questions. But, what I've learned through this process is, especially talking to folks like you, is, we're the best class that you can teach is an authentic class. And so when I hear you, I'm still inspired by what you're doing and by what all these teachers are doing that I've been talking to. So, but yes, I'm willing to share. So, well, thank you, Jean. It was very nice to meet you and I appreciate you listening and getting in touch.
Thanks, Garth. This was really cool. I appreciate it.